Bandwidth for changelog is provided by Fastly. Learn more at fastly.com.
I'm Johnny Boursiquot, and it is go time, y'all.
It's Go Time, a weekly podcast where we discuss interesting topics around the Go programming language, the community, and everything in between. If you currently write Go or aspire to, this is the show for you. All right, welcome back, everybody, for another episode of Go Time. Today is episode number 30. Today's show is actually sponsored by Stack Impact and Backtrace. On today's show, myself, Eric St. Martin, Carlisia Pinto is also here.
Hi, everybody.
And Bill Kennedy is joining us as well.
Yo.
And finally, if you couldn't tell from the excited announcement, we also have Johnny Boursiquot on the call. How are you, Johnny?
I am doing very well.
So last episode, we kind of had the fun. And if you listen to it and it didn't sound as entertaining as you thought it would, look for the raw, uncut version in the show notes, and it becomes even more funny. This episode, we're going to come closer to the heart this episode and kind of have some deep conversations about imposter syndrome. And especially with so many of these conferences coming up and doing call for papers and a lot of meetups looking for people to give presentations, like now's the time to kind of step out of that fear and start submitting some talks and blogging and talking about the stuff that you love. And if you are joining us live, feel free to jump into the Go Time FM channel on the Gopher Slack. This can go back and forth if you guys want to ask us questions. If there's anything that any of us on the show have done, successes or things that we've talked about that it appears we're very knowledgeable on, challenge us on that. And I know myself, I'm happy to explain where my level of understanding actually ends, because I think it's important to kind of tear down these walls of perception where we look at somebody from the outside and we assume that they have some level of knowledge, but really we only see the parts that they share. So anybody thoughts? Anybody want to kick off this conversation?
Well, I think it's good to start with a definition, right? We have to sort of understand the problem.
I was just going to say that.
See, we're thinking alike already.
Yeah, because I think sometimes maybe we mix up imposter syndrome, which can be a very debilitating thing, with just lack of confidence, which is a different thing. Also not good, but it's different.
I think it's hard though too, because I get into debates too, and if Brian were on the show, he'd call me on it too, because Brian's been beating that dead horse for years with me, to kind of get out of my own way. But I think that there can be a difference between confidence and insecurity and kind of like the effects that imposter syndrome has, right? So like me personally, like I'm pretty bad about it, and everybody's took years to convince me to speak publicly, and the only reason I agreed to do this show was kind of forcing myself to get out of my comfort zone. But I'm confident in my abilities. I know I'm a good programmer and that I build good things. But when it comes to like getting out in public, that changes. Does that make sense? So I think people can be confident in their abilities, but still kind of have that fear of kind of like exposing themselves publicly.
Yeah, if you've ever felt like a fraud, right? Regardless of your level of knowledge of any given topic, if you ever felt like a fraud and you thought that exposing yourself to the world, right, would confirm those feelings, I mean, the struggle is real. I mean, that is you're actually suffering from imposter syndrome. It's basically it's pretending to be others, looking at yourself and criticizing yourself, right? It's sort of a lack of understanding of how you should see yourself, your self-worth, your self-esteem. It might be I'm pretty sure it's a psychological sort of problem to be able to reflect on yourself in that way.
And I think that the problem isn't just in technical stuff. I think it's really about personal happiness in all of life. And like, it's interesting. I was at the doctor's office and I was talking to one of the nurses too. Somehow we got in a conversation. I brought it up, the whole like why I don't use a lot of social media, especially Facebook. And a lot of it, outside, people like to like call each other out on Facebook and stuff like that. But more importantly for me is it's that constant view of the curated content from people, right? You only see the best of people's lives and you think everybody else is happier than me, right? Like everybody else is living this perfect life and only I have problems, right? So I think it's the same thing when we look at people we admire in the technical community too, because we see all the good stuff they put out. We see it after it's been through 10 revisions and, you know, we don't see like the behind the scenes and what's going on and their own insecurities. So we perceive them to be at some level and then we hold ourselves and compare ourselves to that perceived level and not the actuality of it, right?
And that's the key. I think you just nail it right on the head there. It's the comparing yourself, right, to everybody else, and you don't know sort of their circumstances, what got them to where they're at, right? You don't know what total level of preparation they had to put into whatever it is that you're judging them based on. So it's I mean, I always sort of have to remind myself, okay, that the only person I should ever be judging, myself, my character, who I am too, is me from yesterday, right? So if I'm always saying that, okay, I need to get better than, it's going to be better than me from yesterday, not everybody else out in the world, because their circumstances and mine are different. It's not the same thing.
I sometimes feel like I'm living a double life because I work really hard to try to make sure that what I'm communicating is accurate, but I always internally have this lack of confidence that I'm going to say something wrong, which is why up until really recently, you haven't seen a lot of meetups record. And I love talking at meetups, but I haven't wanted to record too much because it's like my safety blanket to say if I made a mistake, at least the world isn't going to see it. But when I get up in front of that group, I've got to shut that off and say, I'm up here and I've got to pretend I'm an authority on this and I've got to be that person. And then when that's over, I go back into my like panic mode. Like, what did I do? What did I say? Is everything going to be okay? And then get the courage to do it again, the next time. So it's crazy.
It's funny you say that, because it's kind of the same thing from my perspective too. And for years, I've avoided public speaking and blogging about stuff, and I just wanted to work on cool stuff. I didn't want to share it out of kind of like that fear. And even the podcast, I mean, we're on episode 30, and it's like I'm just starting to get to a point where like my anxiety isn't just like making my heart pump out of my chest every time the mic turns on, right? People don't see that, right? Like they see kind of like the outward perspective, and you're analyzing everything you're doing and every and nervousness and things like that, but most people don't realize. So they perceive that like you're just this walking ball of confidence, right? Just walking out on stage preaching to people and stuff like that, and they don't see the nervous wreck that everybody is for months beforehand kind of preparing. Although there are some people who can just do it, like Brandon Phillips from CoreOS. He's just, I watched him backstage. He's just working on his computer, just waiting for them to tap him on the shoulder and be like, all right, you're up. And he's just goes on stage, and everybody else is just kind of like rocking in their shoes, kind of comforting themselves before they go up on stage.
Yeah, it's. I think we have to sort of disassociate the knowledge that you, as a presenter, right, that you're going to sort of relay, how you're going to do that, right? The knowledge that you have that you want to impart from the delivery and how smoothly, right, or not smoothly it can go. These things should be separated, because one thing is something you've already learned, and is you just want to relay some insight to others who might be struggling, with the same thing, to sort of help them out in that way. But the other part is a completely different set of skills. It is a public speaking skill. That is a completely different art. I mean, some people take years and years and years to master it, and to your point, some people, it just comes very, very naturally, right? But you have to detach those things. One, your inability to deliver a great talk, right, should not be coupled with what you know, right? You can't tie those things together in that way.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that point. And before that, we never really defined what imposter syndrome is. And I wanted to read the entry on Wikipedia. So it says here is a concept describing high-achieving individuals who are marked by an inability to internalize their accomplishments and a persistent fear of being exposed as a fraud. So to Johnny's point, if you are going to speak at a conference and you don't have a ton of experience, and another thing too is that some people are not amazing speakers, but they are fine going up on the stage and doing their best. And they're not going to put in the time to become great speakers, or they don't have it in them, but they speak well enough and they're fine. I think I'm a little bit like that. After I spoke a couple of times, like, okay, I can do this, no big deal. But I'm not a great speaker. And, it takes time and experience, and you have to practice.
It's a skill like anything else.
Exactly.
Yeah, and some people practice a lot and they are terrible. But some people just haven't had the experience and the chance of exposure. And I really wouldn't want these people to label themselves as having imposter syndrome. All that there is happening is that you just haven't been exposed to the experience yet. And that's very natural and normal and healthy for you to have that little bit of struggle and, take baby steps to meet up talk and then graduate to conference talk. It's not imposter syndrome if you feel nervous about going to speak at a conference.
This is sort of a nice tie-in into sort of the whole meetup and sort of leveling up to like a full conference with a larger audience. Those baby steps that you're talking about, you can take them within the context of a smaller audience, right? Your local meetup group is a perfect place to do that, right? Because it's a much smaller audience. Chances are you already know a lot of these people. You go to the same meetup every month. The comfort level there is going to be much higher, and that's like your training ground, right? To be able to deliver a talk and make mistakes and get constructive feedback and learn from those experiences, and then sort of build up to the point where you can actually submit, like a proposal to something like a Gopher where you're going to have 1,500 people sort of looking at you. So you're not going to go 0 to 100 and expect to have sort of the best result possible. That may happen, but to those that it happens to, those are outliers, right? But for the vast majority of people I know who do an excellent job of delivering a talk, they practice their hearts out. I mean, they put in time and time and time again. I mean, Bill's on the call and he likes to say he's an imposter, but I've seen Bill deliver, several talks, and he is masterful at it. I mean, he walks the room, he works the room, and that stuff doesn't come just naturally. I know he practices, right? So this stuff is not going to come easily, but there are ways to sort of level up to that, and you are going to find there are people within the community who are willing to also help you with that.
And lightning talks are another way to do it. And some people don't realize the level of the time that goes into creating a talk, how many months sometimes some of these talks that we see. Yeah, like you said, most people don't just turn it on. There's a lot that goes into kind of doing that, and that dipping your toes and the 0 to 100 thing. There's some people, especially a unnamed member of this show, Brian, who pushed hard for me to speak at a conference with 1,500 people for the first time I spoke in front of people. But the reality of that, though, is too that I did have some dipping my toes too through, organizing GopherCon, having to get up and at least do intros and things like that. And this show, basically last year for 2016, I set a goal that, I wasn't going to kind of hide behind the curtains out of fear anymore, that I was going to start doing things to start putting myself out there. And the show was actually one of the things I forced myself to do, because it's consistent putting yourself out there. So I think that kind of warmed me up to it. But so the interesting thing is like we look at say Bill speaking or things like that. But here's kind of like a fun thing to think about, right? Like Bill and I and Brian all worked on a book together. So this is kind of fun because Bill will commonly make comments to people, especially in the Go Time channel, about things I could teach people. But I constantly look back at some of the stuff Bill's doing in training and think Bill knows way more than me. So it's circular, right? We're constantly all looking at each other thinking that everybody is smarter than us, right?
Yeah, dude, I went through, I think, half of the month of November and December. I went through this period in my head that I didn't know enough to be teaching because of all of the new stuff that's going on around, just like Docker, Kubernetes, all the new improvements. And I sat there, I literally had to get myself out of this funk that I have to stop teaching because I don't know enough. And it's for me, I don't have the problem delivering the message. I'm lucky that way. But I'm constantly questioning the message and my thoughts, and my ideas, and my philosophies, and are they good enough? Are they right? And I always feel like I'm on the opposite side of everybody else. But I think what causes me to feel like I'm an imposter is my thoughts, my ideas, my philosophies. Maybe they're not good enough, and I shouldn't even be saying these things to people.
I think there's a healthy balance. I think sort of in my career, I've sort of seen myself sort of evolve in a way that I know what I don't know, and I know what I can speak confidently about. And when I'm not confident about something, I'm willing to say, well, I don't know enough about this, right? So it's being able to sort of to have that sort of retrospect, like looking at yourself and saying, well, here's what I'm confident about, right? Here's what I don't know and I need to sort of beef up on. And the people who work the hardest, right, at sort of understanding where they sort of what their gaps are, what they need to work on, what they need to study. Those are the people who are continuously improving themselves. Those are the people I want to model myself after, right? Because there's the thing about oh, it's going to come naturally. Again, those are outliers, right? The vast majority of people who are really good at something, they work at it, and being able to identify that, right? You have to sort of be very careful that you're not sort of drown yourself in imposter syndrome in that sense, but really sort of get the benefit, the good out of that sort of fear, right? To say, hey, I know what I don't know. I need to work on that.
The interesting thing, though, too, is there's kind of two additional factors with kind of putting yourself out there to teach somebody something, whether that's training or giving a talk or writing a blog post. At the end of the day, you're trying to take knowledge you have and educate people. So there's two sides of this, right? One could argue that maybe there is somebody who knows this topic better than you, but are they also willing to put in the time to produce the content? And that may not be true, which means that you do a disservice to the people who don't share at least the level of understanding that you do by not sharing, because the person you fear is smarter than you isn't going to produce that content anyway. And secondly, mentoring people is a great way to learn yourself, because you do not want to teach somebody incorrectly. Therefore, you're going to be more careful and make sure that you fully understand the things that you're about to tell somebody. So I can tell you, that like going into the book and coming out of the book, I know way more now about Go than I did before we started on the book. Because when you sit down and you start working on that, you're like, wait, you start questioning your own assumptions about things.
It all sounds like work to me. I mean, if you're willing to put in the work to get better at something, whether it's a talk, right, or giving talks, or whether it's writing a book, it all comes down to work. And having, once you've done the work, right, being able to tell yourself, okay, I am prepared. I've done the work, right? I can have confidence in that. Now, the rest may not be up to me, right? How people see me, that's outside of my control. But I'm going to do the best I can, and I know what I'm talking about. And the rest, you just leave it be. It's going to be what it is going to be. But after you've done what you need to do, you can just be confident and be, reassure yourself of that.
Well, Florin made a really good point that I want to bring up. And every once in a while, you got to have somebody validate what you're doing, even if it's months later, right? Because without some level of validation, at least I know for myself, every once in a while, that's the pickup that I need. That somebody says thank you, or you understand where I'm going there. So validation, I think, becomes important, or at least for me, it could completely just shut down.
But I think that getting validation is good and it helps gauge you, but I think it can become toxic too, right? Because then you're constantly seeking validation to be proud of your own accomplishments. And that's not good either. You're never going to be happy, and people see that, right? Like it happens all the time, at conferences and stuff like that. Speakers will have people come up and it's like they'll kind of like hang on every word and things like that, like looking for the speaker to be like, yeah, that's awesome, you're doing good work. So it becomes hard, because if you're not excited and proud of your own work, it shows in your delivery, right? You're going to kind of hang waiting kind of to get that feedback, whether you're watching the audience or not. And it's going to show. You're not going to deliver the powerful thing. And it's kind of like, Bill, when you get up and talk, right? Like everybody, you have this way of talking, right? That's because you just turn off your mind. You just get up there and you just, deliver. And you don't really think about what everybody's thinking at that moment. You go home and then think about it.
I do, but you also want to at least, okay, from maybe a teaching, and I'm going to give a talk at a meetup. I want somebody to feel like they got something out of it, that there was value in the last 20 or 30 minutes of you spending time and me being there, right? And teaching you these things. And I'm not teaching you incorrectly. I'm giving you something that's going to be positive. And you absolutely shouldn't be looking for the validation. But I know for me, every once in a while, it's nice to get it because I think it helps me remember why I'm doing a lot of what I'm doing, and it helps me to move forward.
So I want to kind of talk a little bit about, I think, the sources of imposter syndrome a little bit. But I think before we do that, let's take a quick sponsor break.
When it comes to profiling and monitoring the performance of your Go applications, Stack Impact is a great service to help you and your team laser focus on hotspot profiling, bottleneck tracing, health monitoring, and more. Stack Impact gives you the necessary historical deep dive performance visibility into your Go application's execution so you can discover and resolve performance bottlenecks with line of code precision. Technically, Stack Impact makes Go's built-in profiling capabilities usable in a production environment. Stack Impact does everything automatically. There's no need to run commands or waste time specifying what to monitor. They've even put their Go agent on GitHub under the BSD license. So if you need to focus on the performance of your Go applications, check out Stack Impact. Head over to stackimpact.com/GoTime to learn more and tell them Brian from GoTime sent you.
Okay, so we are back and we're talking about imposter syndrome. So before the break, we kind of were leading into kind of validation and things like that. And I know I wanted to talk about some of the causes and led into it a little bit with the whole, our perception of other people being kind of a primary cause. But I think another one too is that we're becoming increasingly more a generation of developers who had past lives and kind of came into engineering by one means or another, which means there's a lot of autodidacts, like people who are self-taught, myself included. And I think that can also play a huge role in it too, because you feel like because you don't have that comp sci degree, that you're constantly looking for a way to prove that you share the same knowledge and skill set as these people surrounded by you that have master's degrees in computer science and things. Does anybody kind of feel the same way?
Like I constantly feel like when I'm sort of in the company of said people who do have sort of those advanced level of knowledge, that the moment they start talking about sort of the highly technical stuff and start talking about, how do you optimize this, and start throwing terms around that I've never heard before, that I don't come in contact with, day to day and what I do for a living, then I'm like, oh man, like I'm out of my depth here. How am I, if they turn to me, right, to ask something, how am I going to answer it? And I start to sort of panic a little bit. And I have to catch myself. I have to seize myself and not let that sort of, drag me down, because 9 out of 10 times there will be something you can contribute. There will be an experience that you've had, right, that can impact the way that conversation unfolds, right? You should never sort of discount your own experiences. If you don't know what a term means, heck, I go back, to my desk and I Google it, right? I'm like, okay, that's one thing I didn't know now. So you see these things as opportunities for learning from others who are a bit more advanced in their careers than you are, but never discount your own experiences. Those things are valuable because those experiences are different from theirs. Therefore, you have different context, different knowledge, different things you can bring to bear in that conversation.
If you know the answer, it's easy. If you don't, it's impossible, right?
Exactly.
But different people work on different things. And Damian Grisky really helped me with this because Damian is amazing, right? Like he knows the algorithms, he knows a ton of things. And there are times when I sit back and I go, God, I wish I knew half of what he knew. And one time he literally helped me through it and just said, Bill, this is what I work on. This is what I do. This is not what you're doing. You shouldn't expect yourself to be knowing and doing these things.
Yeah.
And that really helped me kind of put in perspective what I know and where I'm at, depending on where he is and where he's at.
I've seen some stuff by him where it's like, that's it, I quit. So I want to make a quick point too about that. Is like I've had the opportunity to speak with some people from the Go team and stuff too that work on compiler stuff and everything, and we're kind of talking a similar conversation. And it's like we see it as like, oh my God, like I could never work on a compiler. Like that's just crazy. Like only ridiculously smart people do that. but similar response where it's like they've spent their entire careers working on compilers. Like to them, it's just natural evolution, right? So it's kind of that perception we put it there. So the other question, kind of leading back to the whole like autodidact thing, does anybody here have a formal CS degree?
I have an undergraduate degree.
You have a graduate degree? And what about you, Carlisia?
Same, my CS degree is a graduate degree.
So I'd like to hear the other side of it, because this is kind of interesting. As somebody holding a degree, do you get similar feelings of insecurity when you're around somebody that it appears to be, at least from an outside perspective, to have more knowledge than you that did not go that route?
I don't even have to be necessarily around somebody like that, just being around myself. Because time goes by, literally, every once in a while, my confidence goes down to a level. And this happens once in a while. No, it's not all the time. But once in a while, my confidence just dips, and I have to go on LinkedIn and look at everything that I've done, because I sort of forget. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have a CS degree. It's a master's degree. That's amazing. And then I pop myself up, like, wow, I've done this project and that project. And then I pop myself up. And like, I have to go and look at my resume multiple times a day for a few days to bring my confidence. Has anybody done that?
Look at your resume.
Yeah, to pump yourself up.
You're just like, I wish I could be that person. If I was just as smart as that person.
I'm not a failure. I'm not a failure. I'm not a failure.
Exactly. I've done stuff. I'm not a failure. I can do things like this.
I don't know. I think to me, like especially like when we're talking about the validation, like I feel like sometimes getting the validation makes me feel worse. Like I feel like almost like the whole imposter side of it. It's like, oh crap, like it's going to be worse when it's discovered I'm not as smart as that, but speaking to the whole like constantly reminding yourself aspect, though, is like I'll constantly fight stupid issues, like with just environment issues on my own development workstation. I'll be like, why am I a programmer? Why did anybody give me a job doing this? It's just funny.
I only have an undergraduate degree, but when I meet people that have like PhDs, almost in any field, I just respect that so much. I know how much work goes into it, and that can be intimidating for me. But I feel like the undergraduate degree I have, which I got almost 30 years ago, isn't even relevant to what I'm doing today.
But it certainly helped, though, right? You have to admit, it provides a foundation.
I think what it helped is not the tech that I worked on 30 years ago, but the problem solving aspects of it,
right?
More than anything else.
That aspect is very relative, because for me, it helped tremendously. I had to go to school and get that degree to be able to be a programmer. Because, I'm a woman. I wasn't into gaming. Like I said before, I got into gaming and got out quickly because I could be addicted to it. And none of my friends were programmers. I didn't have that environment. I wanted to program, but I didn't have a place to go and do it. Now, some people have friends, or they are on RSC or whatever. They found their niche and they get it from that environment. So, I think it is good to have a degree in general, because it like when you go to school, it teaches you how to learn more than anything. And it also teaches you to handle a lot of demands in a tight timeline, because you have to deliver stuff. You have in writing, you have to write a lot. So I don't know.
See, that's kind of where I go with it too, because I constantly go back to the should I go back to school thing, even if it's not for comp sci. Everybody's like, well, why would you do that? You've got a pretty good career going for you now. You wouldn't make any more money or anything, and it really comes down to that. Like outside of what your major is, it rounds you out. When you're in a room with a bunch of people who have formal educations, they're going to discuss literature and things like that. When you want to write blog posts or books or things like that, like you learn to write well, you learn to speak well, you get a vocabulary. So there's a lot more to be gained from college than just your major. And Marcus kind of brought it up here in the Slack channel too. Like a lot of the stuff with like algebra and physics and things, I've lasted most of my career without more advanced math knowledge and stuff. But now I'm getting into like you want to change, you want to do new things, and now the things I'm excited by, like I need that math knowledge that I don't have because I never went. So you kind of get trapped in these things. But there's also the other side, like interviews, right? Like big O notation, like that's asked so much, right? So
There's one sort of dimension I'd like to sort of throw in there, if I may, and that for a lot of us, and I think Carlisia touched on this a little bit. For a lot of us, a degree helps to sort of legitimize our knowledge, right? So as Carlisia says, being a woman, having that degree helps in a way because it helps her sort of stand out. Or in the eyes of those who believe that, oh, without a degree she wouldn't be as good as what she's doing, right? She had to go to school to get that knowledge, otherwise she wouldn't be as good. Which sort of flies in the face of those who actually teach themselves, right? They know how to learn in that way. We don't all learn the same way, right? So some people need the structure of school, right, to sort of get through something, and that's not wrong. That's just the way they learn. We're not all the same. And speaking as a Black man, like I know that I didn't need a degree. Actually I got my degree way later into my career, but I noticed certain things, certain subtleties, right? Until I got that computer science degree, like it's almost like, I wasn't legitimate, right? In the eyes of some, right? I sort of needed to do that. So for some of us, it's not just a matter of getting it to help us sort of, with problem solving and sort of getting some fundamentals under our belt. It's a social sort of barrier that we must cross to sort of make ourselves or legitimize ourselves in the eyes of some.
That's a very good point that Johnny brought up. I actually wasn't even thinking about that when I mentioned that for me as a woman was good to go and get a degree. What I had in mind was where else would I learn it? My friends weren't doing it. They weren't even interested in computers. I didn't have that environment around me. So for me to get that, I'd need to go somewhere official, quote unquote. But now that you said that, I want to add to it. I just want to add, pretty much say the same thing you said. If I didn't have a degree, and if I had learned on my own, it would be 10 times harder for me to, one, get a job programming, and two, get a good job programming. I remember 3 years ago, I was interviewing, 3 years ago, I was interviewing with a company that they pinged me. I thought they were interesting, so I went and talked to them. And one of the programmers there, he looked at my resume, he looked at me, he said, "Why are you interested in programming?" So at this point, I've been programming for 10 years. And I'm like, dude, out of all questions you could ask me, you ask me this. So if for people out there who ever interview me, don't ask me this question, please. I mean, seriously.
Oh.
I'm going for an interview, for a programming interview. I have been programming. Like it's one thing. Like, why do you like programming? You want to get into it, but you got into it. You stayed all doing it for years. You could get out, right? But no, that's what I'm still going for. Is because I like it. Like, I have to prove to some interviewers that I do like doing this, and I really do. But the point is, the degree really helps people look at my resume and say, okay, she really is into programming, because people want to hire people who like what they do, right? So it's a big deal.
It's actually interesting that, in the era that we're in now, it still carries a lot of weight in job descriptions and hiring. I spent 5 years or so as a senior engineer at Disney, working on really high profile stuff, and it was like one of the managers who became my manager partway in. It was funny. We had like a one-on-one, and during one of the interviews, he's like, "You got to be one of the best." He called me a kid then. I was in my 20s, so he's like, "You got to be one of the best kids on my team." He's like, and he's like, "If I had been interviewed you, I wouldn't have hired you. No degree, in the trash can." And it's crazy, that we're still in this time where so many people are self-taught, and it does carry weight. But I think it also carries weight for us internally too, because you use it as your own internal gauge, right? Like, when do I know enough? when do I feel qualified, right? Like if you're self-taught, you don't have that gauge. Nobody gave you a certificate and was like, yep, you know everything you're supposed to know, you know?
So out of all of the talks that I have right now scheduled for this year, the one that is freaking me out is the one that I got invited back to my college to give a couple of talks to the students and the faculty. That one is freaking me out. Freaking me out.
You have to inspire, Bill.
I know, but I really don't feel like I should be standing up in front of the faculty telling them anything, right? And I think it ties back into the fact that they're PhDs, faculty, they're I don't know. I know it sounds crazy, but imposter syndrome times 1,000 right there.
It's real. Yeah.
It's interesting though, because when you go to a talk, let's play the other role of it, right? When you go to a conference and you attend a talk, are you looking for that entire talk to be nothing but new information that you did not know, right? Or does it have value if you walk away learning one new trick or something that you didn't know already, right? I'm willing to bet for most of us it's the latter. There are some people who, have much more stricter scales, but for the most part, we just want to learn something. And it's probably unlikely that you're going to get up in front of people and everybody in the room is going to know everything that you're about to say to them, right?
So let me say this. When I want to learn a subject or learn a subject better, I get 2-3 books at least, because I want to have different takes on a subject. So if I'm listening to a conference talk and that conference talk has material that was talked about in another conference, I still get a lot from it. It doesn't have to be, every time it has to be all brilliant, brand new, shiny material. What I want the most is that person's take on the material.
And Judd White in the Go Time FM channel brought up a good point too. He said that he thinks the audience is often a lot more forgiving than you think. And I think I would go out on a limb here and say that they're always more forgiving than you think. That, we like to put in our head that somehow our lives are going to come to an end as we know it if we mess up a line on stage or our live demo doesn't work or things like that. But everybody, and we talked to the speakers and stuff too at GopherCon, we told them, it was like, everybody here wants to see you do well. There's nobody in the audience hoping you fail, and even so, even if you mess up, most people don't even notice. They're too busy in their own minds and worlds and stuff. And if they're that engaged in your talk, then they don't care about the little thing you messed up. And I think that's the great aspect of it, is just to consider it in that terms. Like, even if you did extremely bad, it's not going to affect your career in life. It's not over. The next day, nobody even remembers, right? Like, everybody's leaving the conference and things like that, or the meeting, excited about something, right? Nobody's leaving all pumped up like, oh my God, do you know what happened, right?
Like for me, like when I look back at some of the most inspiring talks I've seen at conferences, I don't remember the highly technical ones. Like there might be one or two, that might have basically, opened my eyes to a whole new different way of doing things. But, it's nothing that I couldn't have found out of eventually, learned about, with some Googling or with, by reading a book. There was nothing earth shattering. The ones I remember the most, I've had the most impact on my career professionally, are the ones where the person is telling me a story, right? To harken back to what Carlisia is saying, what is their take on it, right? Well, tell me something, walk me through a journey, right? And the 20 or 30 minutes that you have on stage, walk me through something, right? Give me a perspective that I perhaps have not had, right? That more than likely I would have not had, because I don't have your context, I'm not in your situation. So you're gonna bring something to me, with that story, right? Learn to tell stories. If you get anything from this whole podcast, as far as I'm concerned, is if you learn to tell stories, you find your voice in there, because then it becomes yours. You own it, right? You're telling your story, right? Not just regurgitating a bunch of technical facts, but you really like trying to make somebody feel like they were there with you, like present with you. Paint me a picture, walk me through a journey with you. That's way more important to me than just, give me a bunch of technical facts.
Yeah, share your passion with the world. I mean, it's like a smile. It's infectious, right? So some of my favorite parts about going to conferences aren't the learning. Like you said, it's kind of the you can watch that video later. There'll be a blog post, right? Like going to the conference for me is about like the exhilaration, right? Like everybody around you is just so pumped about this technology, and like you go home just kind of like invigorated and just ready to code and work on your passion project or some cool thing at work you were struggling with. Like you come out of it with like a fresh mind, and like that's what I love the most about it. So anybody who can kind of engage and tell a story and share their passion with me, like I can connect with that.
Hmm.
So it is time for our second sponsor break.
Software teams use Backtrace to take the headache and guesswork out of debugging across their environments. Backtrace jumps into action when your Go application fails by capturing detailed application state information, including the complete set of Go routines, channels and their wait durations, and my favorite, scheduler information. Backtrace analyzes this state and archives it in a centralized object store, allowing you to explore interesting patterns across your errors and plug rich error data into your resolution workflows. Backtrace is used by companies like Fastly, which is Changelog's bandwidth partner, Limelight Networks, Message Systems, AppNexus, and more. Head to backtrace.io/GoTime to learn more and start your free trial.
So we are back, and just before the break, we were talking about giving presentations and kind of engaging the crowd and sharing your passion. And Bill, you were about to say something?
Yeah, I think I would like to see more conferences get rid of the Q&A after a talk. I think if I've ever had a bad experience, it's during the Q&A, and that's when that gives somebody an opportunity to just not be everything we just talked about, right? About you being up there and questions kill me, man. And I can't think fast enough sometimes. When a question's coming at me, I got to think of the question, what they're trying to ask me, give an answer. My hearing isn't that great either. So when I'm on a bigger stage, it's panic time. It's almost impossible. And I think that can lead sometimes to me also feeling like an imposter because I can't answer the question.
So Matt just said, he'd be in favor of not having questions. So we actually had no questions at GopherCon this year at all. So before we kind of did like we did panels last year, but we've been slowly cutting them out. We were trying to find a way to make it work because I think people want to try to ask questions, but kind of to Bill's point, that tends to be speakers' primary fear, interestingly enough, because they feel like they can rehearse the talk enough, right? They could write it down word for word and just rehearse, right? But those questions, like it catches you off guard. You don't know. And I remember when Adam and Jared from the Changelog first interviewed Brian and I for the Changelog about, I think it was GopherCon 2015. Like I remember being paranoid for like a week beforehand because I didn't know what they were going to ask. It's like nobody likes to feel like they're unprepared, especially in those situations, being in front of so many people. You want to feel prepared.
I had somebody, this is how bad it can be. I had somebody just recently in a meetup during a Q&A session say something to me, and they said it with like some anger to them, right? And again, I can't hear and I couldn't process it fast enough, and I hate drama. So I just backed off and assumed he was right and tried to change. But for 2 days after that, when I had moments of thought in my head, I kept trying to relive that moment to figure out, did I say something wrong? Was he right? Whatever. And it took me a couple of days and now I'm over it. But it even it can extend beyond even just that moment. It can linger a couple of days while you're trying to figure it out.
And there's this weird atmosphere though too, because there's a couple of conditions that happen too, even outside like somebody stumping the speaker, like, and just kind of throwing them off their game. You have people who aren't courteous to others on the mic. They just want to talk and just tell a story about like their own project, seeking validation from the speaker. And it's kind of monopolizing the mic. And there's no real question. There's no real value for anybody else except the speaker being like, yeah, that's cool. So there's like situations like that can happen. So all in all, the Q&A thing just it gets difficult to do, and then you have other people sometimes who, because of their own insecurities, need to try to stump the speaker so they can basically live vicariously, right? Like, okay, I don't need to speak publicly because Bill Kennedy spoke and I'm smarter than him. So, therefore I could speak if I wanted to, right? Like these are just kind of the types of personalities and stuff. So there's just a lot of weird things that can happen with the Q&A, and it's just easier not to do it and to let people catch them in the hallway. And somebody, I missed it. Somebody was saying something that they found it hard to address or to go to speakers in the hallway. I think people should question that assumption, because even though I've always had a problem getting up on stage or putting myself publicly, I've always seen other people as people. So like I'll walk up to speakers and talk to them. I think you should. I think their topic, they're excited about it. They want to talk with other people. And kind of like to Bill's point, like he wants that validation. He wants people to come up and tell him like, "Oh, that was awesome. Like I love this," and ask questions about this. But that's more of a one-on-one rather than being put on the spot in front of, a bunch of people.
That is way easier said than done, though, Eric. You have to admit, because while it might come easy for you, I know I've been in situations where I'm like, oh man, like this is so and so, like you're because you're idolizing them in some way, right? Because they're doing the things that you want to do at that level, and you're like, it's like seeing a Hollywood superstar that you really admire or something. Like you're almost like, wow, should I even go approach them, talk to them? You're scared. It really puts like fear into you. Like, how do you deal with that?
So yeah, so a little bit of that is that you have to take it out of your head, like you're measuring them based on your perception of them, right? And it's like I went to a MySQL conference one time where the lead MySQL database engineer there was sitting by himself at the bar. Nobody would go up and talk to him. It's just like, really, like and don't start out on technical stuff. Just start talking about dumb stuff. Like in that scenario, I walked up and I just started talking to him about like it'd be interesting to know how many hard drive failures they have just in a day, like at that scale, right? And that's just kind of how the conversation started off. Like just people like to do it. I've been to Ruby conferences and talked to speakers about sports and things like that. They're people. Just everybody's just people, and it's unfair to pedestal people like that, because even ourselves, we all have insecurities, right? So you only exacerbate the problem for both you and them, right? Like now they're sitting there alone and they're like, wow, did I really do that bad? Like nobody wants to talk to me about, you know what I mean?
I mean, I know I personally make it a point to, when I go to conferences, I try to sort of, form relationships with people. And the best way I find to do that is to try and get personal a little bit, and not about, the talk they just gave or some deep technical concept, whatnot. And often, because, we might be part of the same industry, it'll naturally come up, but it's not forced, right? So it's more about sort of, like you're saying, they're people, right? They're humans. They have a life outside of this conference, outside of this talk they just gave, right? So if you really are interested in sort of getting to know people, you'll find that you develop, friendships and relationships much more easily by talking about something other than the highly technical stuff you just went through.
You disarm them a little bit, like they're insecure about their own talk and all this, and it allows you to help them bring their own anxiety down by just talking about things that are just real, things that don't have to make them think about like, am I about to answer this question correctly?
Exactly.
So, and how about you, Carlisia? Are you able to just kind of walk up to people, or do you have the same reservations? Or
I guess it depends. I'm pretty good at walking up to people and just talking to people, whoever. But for example, I was at Gopher UK and I wanted to talk to Peter Bourgon, and he always had people around him. I'm like, I don't have anything interesting to say to him. I'm sure those people have more interesting things to talk to him about. So I never got to talk to him. So it depends, I guess. If he was alone, actually, no, he was alone one time and I still do. It depends.
Still scared.
Which is silly because I talk to him on Slack every once in a while. But
I'm sorry, Peter, because I'm about to get you swarmed. But if anybody like wants to meet Peter and has not, and is kind of like fearful there, he is one of the most down to earth people I've ever met. Like just a really nice guy, like really interested in hearing what other people are working on, and just like, yeah. So yeah, if you see him at GopherCon this year, you should definitely walk up and talk to him, because just ridiculously nice guy and smart too. So he'll make you feel good about yourself and dumb at the same time.
That's skill right
Eric,
there.
I got a question for the group, Eric.
Sure.
I think there are at least 20 people, if not more, listening to this podcast who probably would love to give a talk, but are hesitating either because of this fear, or they don't feel like they have a topic, or several things. So what do we tell these people to give them the confidence to try to put a proposal together to be part of, if not just GopherCon this year, but all the other conferences that will happen throughout the year?
I have something to say. Giving a talk, any talk, if you haven't given any talk, is terrifying. Now, I don't know how it will be for other people, but I would share my experience. The first time I ever gave a talk, I think it was at an internship I was doing. Every intern needed to give a presentation at the end of the internship. And it was absolutely terrifying because there were PhDs and my boss and my coworkers who were real developers. And I'm just an intern. What do I know? And I had to give a presentation about the project I worked on. I was so nervous. I had to do it. I would have backed out, but I had to do it. It was part of the deal. It was nerve-wracking. The second time I gave a talk, I don't remember. It really wasn't. It was like a third nerve-wracking. So it's not going to be nerve-wracking every single time. The first time is going to be terrifying, and then it's going to get a ton better, or maybe not. But the point is, you need to do it. If you want to give talks, not everybody needs to do it. It's not mandatory that you do it, but if you want to, find a meetup. Like we always saying this: find a meetup, give the talk, or just find a few friends and get them on Hangout and give the talk to them. Because the first time is really, truly is going to be terrifying. Truly, it is. Now it gets a ton better. That's what I have to share.
It is a skill just like any other, and you get better at it by doing more of it. So to use I'm sure now cliche term, lean into it.
You get better, but my point is, like I gave a couple talks last year. I gave two lightning talks at GopherCon, one at GopherCon and one at the opening party. And then I gave a keynote talk at Golang UK. And I'm not super good, but I wasn't terrified because I had given some talks before. So yes, I'm going to get better the more talks I give. But I'm talking about the terrifying scale, because when you're terrified, you get paralyzed. So you have to get over the point where you're not paralyzed anymore, because then you can focus on getting better.
Yeah, I think that like my thoughts and experiences mirror that too. I had minimal speaking experience. I had done a couple meetups, things like that. I had done some training, small groups, 20 people, something like that. I had done, I don't know how many episodes of this podcast by that point, kind of house notes and intros and stuff like that for a couple of GopherCons, but I was outright terrified. And the only reason I did it was because I convinced myself last year that I was going to, I was going to submit. And, in talking with everybody, Kubernetes is a related group, but not directly my people. So I submitted to that conference because it was also a project I was really, really excited about and passionate about. But the whole process, I was terrified. It took everybody a while to convince me to actually submit. And then it got accepted. And it was like, oh, crap. Like, I wish it wouldn't have got accepted. I could have just felt better that I submitted, right? Like, check. At least I submitted, And yeah, the whole process for the months beforehand, it was terrifying. And even, stepping out on stage, terrifying. Even afterwards, that link that Adam posted in the channel for the linux.com or whatever that mentions the talk, like I saw that this morning and I was like, oh crap, like I just want the video to disappear into the ether. There's nothing exciting about the process. Like I don't know whether anybody's just like, oh yeah, here we go. I think especially for your first couple times, it's going to feel terrifying, and you step out of your comfort zone a little bit, and it's rewarding too.
Well, here's a, I'd like to make a proposal since, I have the mic, I have the platform here. I think, this would be a good opportunity to sort of, basically try to help, right, your fellow community members. If you are a meetup organizer, I would recommend that you put together a safe space, an environment where those who are sort of willing to step up, right? Those who haven't given a talk before or who are still trying to get over that fear of giving a talk, maybe it's their first one, or maybe if it's their 15th one, doesn't matter. If they are willing to step up, right? Create a safe space whereby everybody already knows that, hey, we are here to practice our delivery. We are here to practice how we give talks, and allow everybody to feel free to sort of give constructive criticism. This is what you did well. This is what you didn't do so well. You had too many ums, too many pauses, right? You create a safe space whereby you have a technical topic that you're talking about. You're still talking about Go or whatever your topic of just happens to be for that particular meetup, but you're creating an environment where in 10 or 15 minutes of a lightning talk or a longer talk, you allow for that constructive feedback, right, to sort of happen, and it's safe, and you know that you're not being judged on how well you know the material, whether you know it or not. You're being judged on your delivery, and you get to work on that together. So I would challenge meetup organizers to sort of like in an upcoming meetup, like create a meeting that's all about everybody sort of getting better at giving a talk, and I think we'll all sort of get better for it.
I think challenge the community too. There's a number of people in the community that do help everybody with their proposals and their talks. I was fortunate enough to have a number of people help review my talk many times throughout its development, and to Bill Kennedy and Brian Kettleson a couple of times, like over just hangouts, doing little runs of it and stuff like that. Like, people want to help. So reach out, like, hey, I'm thinking about doing a talk, like, and I'm sure that you will get lots of volunteers of people who will help review it or listen to you and give feedback and stuff. And on top of that too, like, I challenge all organizers of conferences too to help facilitate this. Like, we want new blood, right? Like, there's a bunch of conference circuits where it's the same group of people talking. They're just kind of moved from conference to conference. We want fresh blood. So I encourage conference organizers to get involved. Pair them with people who have spoken prior years to help mentor and give advice. That's some of the stuff we do. Another thing that we do, a lot of people don't know, is if you ever see like myself, Brian Kettleson, and Dave Cheney like leave a party early, usually it's because we're going back to a hotel room and letting some of the speakers do dry runs of their talks in a hotel room, and we kind of give advice and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I encourage people to do the same, like help support your speakers. Like, you want them to be successful because you want them to go on and speak at other conferences. So like, let's help everybody grow together in that way.
Yeah, I want to plus one everything that Erik said, and focus on the part of getting somebody to review your talk is essential. Don't go without if you're a beginner speaker, because there are multiple dimensions to speaking on stage. One is your preparation. The other one is your physical presence, your presentation, the presentation of your person. So, but the preparation, there's a lot you can do, and having somebody watch your talk and give you feedback is going to make your talk better. And it's also going to frame it in your head in a way that you wouldn't have it. You can go over it by yourself a million times. You won't get it as well as you will if you have somebody giving you feedback and pointing things out. So just the act of getting that other person's presence and the feedback will help you frame it in your head, the talk. And this is true for me, but I think it's true for most people too.
And I think that, like, if it's your first talk about something you're extremely passionate about, because that at the end of the day is what people are going to take away. Like, some of the best talks I've ever heard didn't teach me anything. They just got me thinking differently, and were very engaging. So you're going to do much better talking about something you're really excited about. Like Brian's case and stuff, like working on little GoBot stuff for the smoker, right? Like you get pumped about because you love barbecue, right? Like, so you want to just share that with the world, and it becomes much easier. It doesn't become so challenging. Like, what am I going to say? Am I going to say this right? Because you're just sharing something you love with the world, right? So, and you can turn anything into a story. I had a hard time looking at my own talk for the conference I spoke at back in November, because it was kind of Kubernetes and this large scale thing, and there's a lot of technical details there. And it's like, well, how do you frame that? Like, how do you tell a story? Like, how do you get people engaged in it? What if there's no new information? It's just using Kubernetes components. And I put a spin on it. So the first, I don't know what it was, 5-10 minutes of the talk, I taught people how cable television works. So it's like, at the very least, if you learn nothing new, you'll walk away at least knowing how the cable coming out of your wall works, right? Like, how does video get there? And people actually like really liked that. I got a number of people who came up to me afterwards that thought it was really cool, and kind of questioned, like, how did I live so long and never actually, like, being a technologist, how did I live so long never questioning how that actually worked? So I think that we can all frame things and bring in interesting views and teach people stuff that they may not know, and people will walk away with something from the talk. But definitely share your love and passion, whatever you do, because that's like same thing here. I think some of the best episodes on this show are when people kind of bleed a little bit of themselves into the show, right? Like they let people in on a personal level a little bit, whether that's through humor or just kind of deep, sharing their feelings and stuff like that. Like that's the stuff people really cling to.
Agree. And just circling back to the topic of preparation, I think it was said by somebody here, there's so many people in the community who are totally willing to help. If you can't find somebody, ping somebody, because one of us or anybody, you will be led to somebody who can help you with preparing or presenting a conference talk. And there's a lot of material on the internet too. And I wanted to mention that GoBridge has a repo with guidelines for putting together a talk. And Bill Kennedy is very willing to help. And I'm saying this because with his permission.
He already announced that himself, so you're in the clear.
Yeah.
We're in the clear. To the point that we have that document out in GoBridge that can really help you prepare for presentations. I'm really out there. I'm willing to work with everybody who wants to give a talk. And even if your talk doesn't make GopherCon, there's so many other conferences out there that it's worth your time if you really want to give a talk. And even if you don't have a topic right now, but you're just like, I want to give a talk, reach out to me and we'll find what that topic is, and I'll help you prepare that talk, and we'll submit it to GopherCon or anything else that's coming up. So if you have inside of you this desire to really try to give a talk, it's something you want to do, let me know.
And for those of you listening, you should really take this to heart. This is from somebody who's given lots and lots of talk and is very experienced at this. So this is the stuff money can't buy. So definitely take advantage of it. And
I challenge everybody, like, this is a new year, right? Everybody set yourself a goal. Do some public speaking. If you've always been afraid of it, do one thing this year. Pick one event, do a meetup, do an online meetup, do a lightning talk. If you don't want to prepare like a 20-minute or 40-minute presentation, do a lightning talk. Just share some sort of love, Tell me that, like, you can't stand your dog waking you up in the morning, so you're building an Alexa plugin to tell Alexa to let the dog out, right? Like, just share something and get over that fear and realize that it's not what you put it in your head as. Like, it's not how you make it out to be the experience. And get used to it and start thinking, like, we have the whole imposter syndrome we were talking about kind of earlier in the show. Like a lot of people, and myself included, you go to a conference and you start thinking like all these other people are amazing speakers, and like, what are they going to think of me? And like, I'm not a good speaker. I've never spoken before. And the reality of it is none of them care. They are too focused on their own talk and delivering it well to really like care about like how much experience you have or how well you do on your talk, right? And let's start to accept that people are people. Like, approach them, treat them, as you would anybody else at a party. That you don't know who this person is, right? Like, you do yourself and them a disservice. And let's start thinking that, what we see of people is only what we see, and that our perception may not be the reality, right? Like if I post pictures of some tinkering with hardware or software defined radio, and everybody's like, oh man, Erik knows that too. No, I don't. And software defined radio, I know zero. Like I'm struggling, like just figuring it out, hardware, I can tinker, I can build stuff at best. I am not an electrical engineer, So it's like let's start to accept that maybe like we've built false perceptions of people, and we're holding them to a standard that maybe we shouldn't, because it doesn't do them service, and it doesn't do you service.
And I think another thing too is, if you are at a talk and you see a mistake that was made or something wasn't 100% accurate, keep it to yourself and go to that speaker after and just ask them if they want that feedback. Some speakers don't want it, and some people. So it's solicited at the end of the day, because we all want to improve. We want to know what mistakes we made. We might be giving that talk a couple of different times. We all want to be accurate in the things we're saying, but don't do it during Q&A. Try to do it privately and ask that speaker if they're interested in the feedback. And then it will be well received, and it will be great, because the next talk is just going to be better.
But you get bonus confidence points with the crowd when you point out what they said wrong, right? That's the way it works, right? No?
Stop the speaker.
Oh my God.
It doesn't work like that.
Just me?
On the same note, if you watch a conference talk on YouTube, remember to give it a thumbs up. It's nice for the speaker when they go look at their video, and it's a bunch of thumbs up, if you like it, of course.
That's true too, I guess, in the same spirit of the Free Software Friday, like let people know.
Yeah, I have to make it a point. I forget. I watch so many YouTube videos and I forget, and I have to make a point to remember to give a thumbs up.
Oh, I have a bookmark open here, and I totally forgot to talk about it when we were talking about kind of like the self-taught and autodidact thing. There's a book by a gentleman named Rob Connery, and it is called The Imposter's Handbook, which I haven't read the whole thing. I'll be honest there, but I've read parts of it, and it's actually really cool. So it's like coming from the perspective, like if you're self-taught and you don't have the formal CS degree, and like you feel inadequate, like when people talk big O notation or lambdas or P versus NP and all that stuff, like that's kind of like this frame of mind this book comes from. And it's actually really cool.
Do you have a link?
Yeah. Let me grab that. There we go.
It took me, I think, 2 full days to understand P and NP, and I still think I'm about 50% of the way there, man. So yeah, those things are not easy for me. I can tell you that much.
I remember the first time somebody tried to explain the big O notation to me. I remember the first time that I had to tell a colleague when he was writing a formal proof for something, and he wrote some calculus down, and I had to admit that I didn't know what the weird looking E was. The summation.
That's why imposter syndrome is very serious, because we all have confidence issues. On a good day, we might not have any. On a bad day, we might have a lot. But imposter syndrome is paralyzing, and when you have it makes it really hard for you to learn new things, because you look at something and you just go, oh, I can't possibly learn this. It looks hard and I feel incapable. So it's important to identify if you have imposter syndrome, so you develop some mechanism to get rid of it or minimize it, so you can move on and learn things. Because the whole point of it is that you have learned things, but you have learned things, you have been accomplished, but just imagine how much more you could accomplish if you didn't have that blockage, right?
And I think it also helps to quickly reach out to friends. I think I talk to Erik and Carlisia every day, and not every day, but maybe once a week we have these types of conversations and we help each other through it. So you can't suppress it down. You got to talk about it and find people that you trust to have those conversations.
Absolutely. Yes.
And let people push you a little bit too. the group here and Brian in particular, because he's known me the longest, has everybody's been slowly pushing me like you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, so let people push you a little bit out of your comfort zone. And yeah, I mean, man, it took a long while. And ask well, Adam's hiding behind the fourth wall here, but Adam, I think, has tried to get me to on camera for 2 years, 3 years, 2 years, for GopherCon, for kind of like grand vision and love and experience and kind of behind the curtains type stuff, sharing with the world. And it's like, camera, run. So
Yeah, I want to second that too. Absolutely. Make sure you have or you develop a group of friends that you can have safe conversations with, that when you are in doubt and you're doubting yourself, you can go back and say, hey, I'm having a really hard time with this, but I need to move on. What do I do? You don't need the right question. You just say, I'm having a hard time, and they will help you move on. I have people that I do this with, like you were saying, we talk, like the Go Time, my co-hosts and producers, like we talk a lot about this stuff. And other people too that I have as resources. So it really helps, makes a difference.
And, something that I don't tell a lot of people too, just if this is holding you back at some level, I have a mild form of Tourette's. My daughter has a more advanced with vocal tics. She's amazing. I mean, she's in college and she deals with that. I have a mild form of Tourette's. And when I get really nervous, it can get bad. And that's a fear of mine too, sometimes when I'm out on stage. And I have a trouble watching videos because I see the tics. It's like drives me crazy. And I've shown Erik a video and Erik's like, I don't see anything. And I'm like, dude, look at this, 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 and this. So if you also feel like, maybe I have a, not necessarily say Tourette's, some sort of handicap, and that's going to cause me to have problems, I'll also try to fight through that as well, if this is something you really want to do.
So I think we've had a long, engaging discussion here and ran through time. So we'll skip over the projects and news, and we'll do kind of, does everybody have something they want to do for Free Software Friday?
Yeah, I have one quick thing.
Okay.
I've been using.
So hold on, before we move on to that, let me just kind of close out the last thing. So, we talked about this kind of breaking out of your shell. Like, let's make 2017 that year, everybody. Like, I want to see everybody try to submit some talks or speak at meetups or start meetups and just kind of break out of that comfort zone. Let's make this the year.
Yeah.
Agreed. Let's do it.
So on that, Free Software Friday, Johnny, you had something?
Yeah, I've been using this sort of a window management tool, sort of without a keyboard kind of thing for a long, long time. It's called Spectacle. You can go to spectacleapp.com, I believe, and you'll be able to sort of download it. So it's a quick and easy way to just use your keyboard to just slide windows to the left, to the right, different monitors, compartmentalize them in different areas of the screen. So it's been sort of really helpful for me to help keep on top of the different several sort of windows I've got going on. So shout out to the creators of that project. It's really awesome.
Well, that's awesome. And this is for Mac?
Yes.
Awesome. I need to remember that, because I've always been looking for apps to do window management when I'm on my Mac. All right, who's next?
I can go next. So this week somebody showed me a tool that is like Go Playground, but for Docker. And it's really cool. This tool was made by Marcos Ligadal. I'm sure I'm not saying his last name correctly. Sorry, Marcos. He's from Argentina. So he did this tool. It's basically a virtual machine on the web where you can run a Docker containers. It create clusters with Docker features like swarm modes. And you can also pair program. It's really, really cool. So you should check it out.
Nice.
Did you guys know this tool? I'm going to paste the link. I had never seen it before.
No, I haven't seen it either.
Oh, there's a link on the channel.
Awesome. And how about you, Bill?
This past week, I spent a lot of time with Daniel Whitenack working on our data science class, and been learning a lot about Pachyderm and all of the data science packages like Gonum are out there. I mean, it's just amazing to me what's being developed in this area right now. And what I'm learning, because I didn't know anything about what really data science was up until really the last couple of weeks. Really, really cool stuff.
Awesome. All right. So I have something that is similar but different to Johnny. So it's called Polybar. So if you listen to the show, you know that I'm a huge Linux and i3 window manager fan. So it has like a kind of title bar that has the workspaces in there and things like that are standard. But this is actually kind of like a new i3 bar where you can kind of put stuff in there, and it's got a lot more styling and stuff to it and clickability, and there's sliders and stuff. So if you happen to use i3 Window Manager, I guess it works with anything too. If you used Awesome or a number of other window managers, it would work just as well with it. But if you're looking for kind of like a more fun and expandable bar, then that's a good one to look at. It used to be called Lemon Buddy, I think. It got renamed at some point. But that is mine. So before we close out the show, Johnny, you got shout out?
Yes, I do actually. My first one is really to the Baltimore Go community. I recently relocated from Boston after spending about 13 years there. Where I was a co-organizer for Boston Golang and Boston Ruby. Upon relocating down to Maryland, I needed some new tech friends. So I figured, hey, there's no better way than to do that than to actually start a meetup, and a Go meetup is one of the best ways to do that. So it's been growing. Every month, every time we meet, there's a few more people showing up. Just want to give a shout out to them, especially those that have been coming consistently month to month. And we are growing. It's great to see that. So I'm hoping to sort of replicate the same sort of a growth success story that I saw in Boston, and really sort of establish a sort of a thriving Go community in the Baltimore area. My last shout out is to you. Yes, you, the one listening to the show right now, that's dealing with imposter syndrome. And you're sort of thinking, okay, how do I muster up the energy and the courage to sort of rise above it? Know that you're not alone, right? The internet's got, the web's got lots of resources, but again, take advantage of some of the resources we pointed out during the show, and know that I'm rooting for you, right? I've been right there. If you want to reach out, there's plenty of people that will help you through this. You're not alone. So, best of luck to you.
And I'd like to add to that, likely there's nobody on this show that is less secure than you. Or yeah, man, double negatives are hard. But everybody here on this show is just as insecure. Some of us more than others, but there's nobody on this show that feels like confident in all of their abilities all day or day. Like it just doesn't happen like that. So like Johnny said, you're not alone. Feel free to reach out to us too. We're happy to talk about some of the stuff behind the scenes too. We're getting a little more public during this episode, but I know I've had conversations with several people, behind the scenes, and kind of shared personally, what it's really like behind the scenes versus the public perception. And back to our point before, Free Software Friday, make 2017 the year that you step out of your shell and get out in front of people, even if it's a 5-minute lightning talk. Hell, meetup organizers organize lightning talk night, where every talk that night is lightning talks. No one person talking the whole meetup, just 10 5-minute talks, and let people just get that 5 minutes. They can rush through it and feel done, and then they can feel confident the next time, where like nothing bad happened from that 5 minutes. Maybe I'll do another one. So helpful to do that. So with that, I think it's time to wrap up the show. I want to thank everybody who's here on the show, especially coming in and kind of sharing kind of your deep kind of personal fears and feelings on things. Huge shout out to our sponsors, Stack Impact and Backtrace. Without them, we couldn't keep doing this show. So definitely go show them some love. Definitely share the show with fellow Go programmers. And this one, this one isn't necessarily just Go. So, if you know somebody who has imposter syndrome, send them this episode. Have them join and listen to every episode. We are GoTime.fm on the interwebs. If you haven't subscribed yet, we are at GoTimeFM on Twitter. GitHub.com/GoTimeFM/ping. If you want to be on the show, you have comments, you have topic suggestions. With that, goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
Bye. This was fun.
Bye.
Special thanks to our sponsors, Stack Impact and Backtrace. Because of them, we're able to produce this show. Also want to thank Breakmaster Cylinder for the awesome beats and Fastly for the bandwidth.